Well,
Yeah.
welcome everybody to the Krix presentation this morning in association with our newly appointed distributor, Envision, in the UK and Benelux. Very pleased to have them on board. You can probably see across the top of your screen a couple of gentlemen. We have Michael Cox, who is the marketing manager from Krix. We have
Hello.
Don McKenzie, who is the Australian sales manager for Krix and also helps me out, Dave Williams, who looks after international sales. So we'll just kick straight off right into this, and what we're going to try and do is start off with just a bit of a history, if you like, of the Krix brand, because we've been around an awfully long time, a lot more than people sort of understand. Started out in 1974 as a dream come true for Scott Krix. Basically, my understanding is he didn't want a real job, so he decided he would make loudspeakers in South Australia. Things went so well that in 1976 he actually opened up his own retail store, the Acoustic Foundry, predominantly selling kit speakers as well as his own, but also doing custom design systems for nightclubs and live venues and the likes. That obviously went pretty well because in 1979 he brought his brother Ashley on board and they built their own factory. Still on the same premises now, just things are a little bit bigger than they used to be. 1980s, this is when Krix really started to take off a little bit, when cinema was starting out and growing in Australia to a degree, I guess, where people wanted bigger and better. And Scott was actually approached to try and improve a local cinema. He actually invented the first baffle wall, infinite baffle wall, which is now used in commercial cinemas all around the world. And with Krix product, we actually utilize it in our MX series as well. So this is really when the Krix story really sort of kicks into high gear, I guess. 90s, surround sound came around, big in-home theatre starting to happen with Dolby Surround and the likes. Krix actually received a world first with the THX accreditation from Lucasfilm in the USA as well, which is pretty important sort of time. Factory needed to expand because things were going so well, particularly with commercial products. 2000s, 30-year anniversary, big factor. Now getting close to our 50th, which is even better. But there was big expansion, again, predominantly with commercial, right through US, Europe, Asia, Middle East, so worldwide, really. And Scott himself actually received a Cinema Pioneer award for his contribution to the cinema industry, so quite a big deal. And then also in the 2000s, probably the biggest differentiating factor, I guess, in some of the Krix products, and that is our patented horn and waveguide technology. This is one of the key fundamentals that make us sound different to the rest. And then going into the 2010s, another 10 years go by, Dolby Atmos comes out and Krix again go through a massive growth phase. Part of this was down to the fact that Scott himself worked with the Dolby guys, working through the Dolby Atmos spec. And in fact, I believe Krix were the first company to submit speakers that all of them passed the Dolby Atmos specification on first testing. So pretty substantial sort of a win for Krix there. And then to present day, where of course Dolby Atmos is now huge in commercial cinemas around the world. We've been exporting residential product for quite some time now. And we're getting massive growth through, well, Australian market just continues to grow all the time, but New Zealand, Europe, Middle East, and of course, you guys in Europe now, where we're seeing pretty substantial growth as well. One of the key factors that I'll just point out at this point is around commercial cinema. One of the reasons we think it's important to note our heritage in this is quite simply that unlike a lot of manufacturers, we've come from commercial cinema back down into residential. So we've built based around proper cinema speakers, whereas many other manufacturers have come the other way, where they've come from hi-fi and tried to build home theater speakers. We think this gives us a really substantial advantage over a lot of our competitors out there in the market. Just to point out some of the heritage and world firsts from Krix though, as mentioned, Scott himself invented the infinite baffle wall. We had the first THX certified 4-way screen speaker systems. You know, a couple of things like, you know, world's first 12-inch dual concentric surround speakers, quite an unusual sort of concept, and you know, that was Krix first. Dolby Atmos ceiling surround speakers, although this doesn't seem like a big deal, it really is when you start talking about low profile, high power handling. Most, in order to actually achieve the Dolby Atmos spec for ceiling speakers, were huge, big things and difficult to mount. Ours weren't. We also created the world's largest screen speaker system in a cinema in Dubai. And this was for an auditorium of 80 meters deep, bloody huge. Still in operation, and yeah, very, very impressive. And now we actually have over 4,000 commercial cinemas worldwide, so quite a big deal. And we're utilizing all of this sort of technology, bringing it back into our residential. Now, as I say, we've been around a long time, but why choose Krix? There's many others. Well, for starters, world-class design. It's actually a family-owned business still. Proudly and passionately family owned. We're obviously competing against the multinationals. Now, as Ashley put it to me once, being as good as the multinationals, that's not good enough. We have to be better, because our name means everything. If we're putting our name on it, it's us personally. So they really do dedicate themselves to making this the best they possibly can. There is a dedicated R&D team at the Krix headquarters in Adelaide. The guys are passionate. I like to call them the propeller heads. They know far more than I do, and ever will probably, but they're brilliant at what they do. Scott himself still gets involved quite heavily as well in the development of new technologies and new speaker, new boxes, the whole works. And everything we do is designed, you know, for a purpose. Unlike many others where it's let's hit a price point, Krix doesn't. We've gone the other way. We've kind of gone, righto, we need a speaker to achieve X, design it from the ground up to achieve that X, and then hopefully it hits the right price points. And if not, well, that's what it needs to be. That's what it needs to be. So it's a slightly different sort of approach to many. Built with integrity. Now, I think there's a lot of people can claim this. One of the big differences, we are actually still Australian handmade timber products. So we, in our factory, we are still making our own boxes. Many others are now outsourcing to China and India, where it's a lot cheaper. We're still doing it all in Australia. It's, you know, again, the family are involved in the QC. So we like to think there's a, you know, top end attention to detail. In terms of the testing, the propeller heads, as I've called them already, weren't satisfied with what they could buy off the shelf, so they actually designed their own hardware and software measuring equipment, which actually is able to measure down to the 11th harmonic distortion, which is pretty impressive. And this test, basically every cinema speaker goes through to make sure that it actually meets the real world performance levels that they, you know, desire. So when you get it home, you know it's going to work, and should work for years and years to come. It's very rare that there is a failure within a Krix, and usually when it does happen, it's down to user error, but hey, it happens with everything. Outstanding customer service. Well, what can I say? That's us. We're the team. But it's also part of the reason why we've appointed InVision as our UK distributor. We believe in customer service and making sure that the product is serviced and supported to the utmost. And yeah, we're pretty excited by this new partnership. Small little factor, but it's a big factor for us, and that is our environmental credentials. We're constantly looking at new techniques and new ways to lower our carbon footprint. We use solar in the factory, recycled water. We recycle cutoffs for timber. We recycle cardboard. So everything that we possibly can, we're looking to be environmentally friendly. Just a few of the key little points as to why you would consider Krix as a brand. One of the other factors, and possibly one of our main factors, was, as I mentioned earlier, our patents on our horn and waveguide. Now, I like to explain this with these diagrams here because it probably just highlights it perfectly. I've heard a lot of people over the years saying about how horns can be very shouty and beamy in the sound, and Krix are not that way. And what it comes down to is this constant directivity horn. So a conventional horn, as you see here, this is the array of frequencies with your treble being in the center, mid-range splaying out a little further, and then your upper bass, lower mid-range going even wider again in a conventional sort of splay. What that does is it gives you hot spotting of certain frequencies, and this is where you get that shoutiness or the beamy sort of edgy sound that conventional horns have. What that also does is what you can see here is you get a very wide splay of sounds, a lot more reflections within the room, so it becomes a lot harder to control, and it's not as defined a sweet spot or listening sweet spot. Whereas with a Krix constant directivity horn, you get a much more uniform sort of frequency range, if you like, through the horn, which makes it a lot less beamy. It also means, as you can see down here, you get a much more directional focused sound, which gives you this nice sweet listening sound hotspot. So in terms of room treatment, yes, we still recommend room treatments. However, the amount that needs to be done should be a little less, just because of the fact that the sound is cleaner, it's a lot less reverberation, so you get a better definition and clarity from the sound all around, really. This is another good example of that, and this is another hotspot diagram where you can see where it first comes out from the compression driver or from the tweeter. You get a real hotspot, and as the sound disperses out, you get this nice wide, even sort of splay of sound. What would have been nice to show you, and I don't have, but is on a more conventional type horn, you'll often see like a dark hot spot right smack in the middle here, and that might be in the high frequencies. And that's that beaminess, again, that we mentioned. So yeah, it's a big factor, I believe, in what really makes Krix stand out. And until you hear them, yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing. You'll enjoy, I'm sure of it. One of the other things that we believe in is using single point source. So in terms of, you know, a lot of people out there using multiple drivers, we like to keep it simple. Utilizing a horn allows you to get high sensitivity, very good directional sound, and a good frequency range without having to add multiple drivers, which then you get all kinds of sort of, you know, distortions, overlays of sound. You can get real hot spots and beaminess in different frequencies. But by using horns and a single driver and big drivers, we get this big dynamic sort of a sound. So the series that we actually have 3 series in our dedicated cinema. Series X being the initial range, and X stands for extreme. This was the first of the dedicated home theater speakers, basically utilizing the commercial cinema and making it a little bit neater and tidier and a little bit smaller for home theater. Now, this is designed for rooms up to around about sort of 25 meters-ish in depth, and still to be able to give you Dolby Atmos spec of 105 dB continuous. So massive, big sound. As you can see here from the images, very industrial looking. These can actually be angled to suit, but then we still recommend building a baffle wall around these, which is a fair bit of work. You can see though, sensitivity very high, power handling ridiculously high. So yeah, massive big cinemas, you know, big home theater rooms. Series X, Series SX is basically small X. And the whole idea behind this was simply you need surrounds, but also not every room can take such a massive speaker as the X series. And so SX was born, and this was designed so you could really do home theater in a much smaller room of sort of 3 to 8 meters in depth, but also give a versatile range of surround speakers to complement the X series. So what we actually have 2 ranges effectively within SX for surrounds and main speakers, but this is a good example of the versatility of the range. So Megaphonics, we've used this one because it's our biggest selling of the ranges, but Megaphonics here, this is an angled on wall, ideal for 5.1, 7.1, 9.1 surround, where the speaker system for your surrounds is just above your ear height. Very sensitive, very high power handling. All the whole Megaphonics range are the same sort of sensitivity and power handling. We then have a flat version. And the idea behind that is for your Dolby Atmos spec, where they suggest, speakers should be more at ear level, then you want a flat speaker, ideal for it. We also then have centers. These also then lend themselves particularly well for if you've got a large format, LED display or something, and you want a big cinema sound still, but of course you've got a screen that it's got to, go around somehow. So your Megaphonics flats and center, or Megaphonics in wall in center as an option for you. We also do an in room. Then we've popped this one here just to give you an example as well. This is our slightly smaller range. So we have Megaphonics. So of course we have phonics that are not so mega. Pretty awesome, but just not as big. Less sensitivity, but still very high power handling. And these will still give, you can put these in a room of sort of 4 or 5 meters deep and still, achieve your Dolby Atmos reference of 105 dB as surrounds without too much difficulty. And then we have what we like to consider probably the mainstay of what Krix dedicated cinema is now, which is Series MX. Now, this series actually came about, I believe, over a couple of bottles of wine with Don and Scott Krix himself. That is Don that is on this presentation with us for later on answering your questions, which I'll actually...
True story.
And I'll mention it now that if you have questions, please ask them away, and at the end we'll try and address as many as we can. So Don used to be an installer. And that's the main thing. That is the main thing. But Don being an installer and running install teams was coming up against the problem of installation of a baffle wall was time consuming, which of course is money, and as well just cutting the timber out and getting it right and measuring it was just a nightmare. So he wanted a better way to do it. And sat down with Scott and said, come on, mate, you're the brains. How do we make this easier and make my life easier with my installers? And between the two of them, MX was born. So some of the key points of MX was to overcome a few factors. One was the infinite baffle wall, which they did by providing a solid surface right across. LCR, so LCR, sub in between, all complete together creates a wall. And then when inserted into a wall, you create a full infinite baffle. The idea behind this is that it will actually give you extra decibels, taking a little bit of load away, which is very nice. But it also gives you a very nice sort of controlled sound stage, if you like, where it helps with, as an example, we've put the front baffles on with sound deadening material, and the idea behind that is it will help with room reflections, reflections off the screen coming back to the product, just absorbs, just helps with intelligibility and overall performance. But the way they're designed also is that with the MX20, 30 and 40, they actually have speaker terminals on the front behind this tiny little dot, and we'll see it in more detail as we go through, so that you can actually lift the product into the space with the speaker wire hanging out the front, connect it, boom, done, plug back in, and that's designed so that it covers over those terminals and stops any reflections, from the projected light onto them. So when they're behind the screen, you won't see any sort of reflections or anything like that. But massive, big dynamic sound from what is really quite, shallow boxes as well. So MX5 starts at 190 millimeters, and then we go through to the largest, the MX40, where it's 335 mil deep. So it's not particularly huge. which is a good space saving when you're trying to make your system as discreet as possible and utilize as much room as possible within your cinema. This is a great image showing how to build a false wall for your baffle. Now, what these guys do, not only with the LCRs like this, we also have the ability to add in spaces. And the idea behind that is it gives you versatility in not only room size, because we have an MX5, which is designed for small rooms of sort of 3-4 meters deep, through to the MX40, which goes through to like 14 meters deep. So we can fill room size based around the right product for that, but also screen size, because as you go larger in screen size, you can add in spaces between your outer LCRs to make sure that your left and right speakers are to the outer edge of your screen, so therefore you're getting the correct sound stage right across. Another factor Krix have designed is to center, and you'll see here the way the screen is situated so that the center line is filled with sound. And the idea again is just about making sure that your sound stage is correct behind your cinema, so you're not getting weird sounds from weird areas. And a factor I mentioned earlier, massive dynamic range. Part of that is to do with the fact that we're using big drivers. I was asked a question the other day about why do you use big drivers? Why don't you use multiple small ones? Well, big drivers give you so much more, and it's a single point source. It's just, there's many factors, but that's one of the key ones, and you just can't beat that sort of big dynamics. So the range itself, basically this is your small entry level, if you like, of the MX range. MX5, as mentioned, designed for room depths of 3 to 6 meters. This will still give you what we call performance level, where you'll get a continuous 102 dB, which is a massive amount of sound. 8-inch driver in the LCRs, using our patented waveguide with a high-powered tweeter behind it. Very efficient. You can run the LCRs off a good high-powered receiver, the likes of an audio control or something, no problems at all, and then just put on an amplifier on the subs. Great little system. MX10 just goes slightly bigger, slightly more sensitive, going to 97 dB sensitivity on the LCRs, and slightly higher in profile. Again, the whole idea of this is it's big dynamic sound. You could run the LCRs if you wanted to off a really good high power receiver, and then amplifier on the subs. At this point, it's kind of at that, hey, if you can run separate power amps, I'd always be running them if you could anyway. The 12-inch subs just give you that little bit more dynamics, bit more bottom end, bit more sort of mid-bass kick. And this will easily, again, up to an 8 meter deep room, still give you 102 dB, no problems. You'll note on these, they're completely flat on the fronts, and that's because the speaker terminals are on the back. These are small enough and light enough that it's still an easy install. Then we get to the MX20. Now, a couple of differences here. LCR module, believe it or not, are utilizing the same driver and waveguide as the MX10, but in a slightly larger cabinet. Very high sensitivity. The subwoofers go up to a 15-inch sub, very high sensitivity again. But there's a couple of factors here. One is they will fill a room up to 8 meters with 105 dB reference level without too much trouble there. We put the terminals on the front. Because they're bigger, they're also a little bit heavier and harder to lift into place. So the idea of this is you can just hang your speaker wires out the front, lift each module in, connect it through the front, and pop this cover back over the front again. Another factor is you'll notice there's holes on the front, sound deadening. There's a couple of factors behind this. One is by adding the holes, it's actually adding more surface area, which is more absorption. The second one is it looks bloody cool. And in some ways, it's probably just as important as the rest. Something that's really common to be done in Australia, and we're finding that it's starting to take off around the world, is when you've got a really nice acoustically transparent screen in front of these, people are running a whole ton of LED lighting right around so that we can see it because it looks cool. So every now and then they'll pop that on. MX30 slightly bigger brother. Just going to the actual horn gives you more dynamics, more clarity, and goes up to a room depth of 14 meters at reference level. This is one of our most popular systems. Then the Big Daddy, the MX40. So going to the new three-way design, single or two-way horn, same bass drivers, same mid-bass drivers, again up to a 14-meter deep room, 105 reference, no problems at all. And this little chart here, I'll skip through this fairly quick because this is actually available online to download from the Any MX product page on the website, the Krix.com website. And this gives you an indication as to which Krix for what room. And same with the surrounds is there as well. And then I'll just give you a quick touch of the concealed ranges. Now these are a complementary range, if you like, for Atmos speakers. Unlike many, we use a sealed enclosure so that you can actually get a much bigger bass control, much bigger sound. Stratospherics here is an 8-inch dual concentric, kick ass, can't go wrong. Now at that point, I'm going to exit out of here and see if we've got some questions to answer while we still have, I believe, a couple of minutes left. If I can get the questions up. David, are you there?
Yes, just to interject, Dave, one question's come in that says, why are drivers inside the subs in the MX series installed diagonally? Does it have anything to do with fighting vertical room mode issues?
Yep, you answered your own question, you very intelligent man. That is exactly why it was done. It's just to try and counteract those, room modes.
The MX5 and MX10, we don't do it with those two models because there's physically not enough room to be able to do so, to have them asymmetrically mounted, but we certainly do it with the reference models, the 20, 30 and 40.
Just one other question, chaps. How much projected pixel resolution is lost due to screen movement when subwoofers are placed behind acoustically translucent screens?
0. Using very big stiff diaphragms that we do on our drivers, the movement in those woofers is, you barely see them move really. So as long as you're mounting it at the correct distance from the screen, which we recommend sort of 30 to 50 mils from the screen backing surface, you shouldn't have any movement at all. So no change, no problem.
Mainly for woven. I think perf, microperf and all that, it'll probably come down to the screen manufacturer's recommendations, that you're mounting the product the correct distance away and you've got enough air dissipation from the drivers, like the subwoofer drivers and the ports. It'll probably more come back down to the install type and the type of screen as well. So it's a tricky one for us to answer universally, but generally when it's all installed correctly, there's very little screen movement at all.
One other just come in. Should we tow, TOE, should we tow in the L&R modules of the MX series if the L&R 30 degrees from the MLP?
Yeah, did you want me to get this one, Dave?
Yep,
go for it.
Yeah. So if you can, I mean, what happens is, I think I heard most of the question in, can you tow in the left and the right speakers? So yes, you can, and I suppose the only downside to that is that you need to make the cavity a bit deeper and a little bit wider because you're rotating the speaker or panning the speaker around. It does mean you need extra depth and also a bit more width. So if you do have that room for the cavity in the room that you can do that, then by all means you can make it deeper and tow them in just to get yourself a bit more on access to the speakers. If you can't do that and it has to stay flat, as Dave spoke about with the constant directivity horns, they give such great off-axis dispersion that you still, get, so much performance even if you are off-axis to them. But if you just want to go that extra little bit and tow them in, and it looks pretty cool as well, then by all means go ahead and get yourself that bit more on access to them. Yeah.
One other question, what is the X-max of subwoofers, What is the X-max of sub drivers in the MX40?
Ooh, I reckon it's about, I think it's about 15, 20 mil. I'd have to check. I'm not sure if that's just one way or both. I'd probably need to check the R&D department and get back to you.
Look, happy to take that question on info@krix.com. Email if you want. Michael will pick that up anyway. So yeah, more than happy to take that directly if you would like.
One other. What's max SPL of MX10 and MX20 subs?
Max SPL. Well, we have a full sort of, you know, system suggested of, you know, continuous at 102 dB. The actual subs as a standalone max SPL, I honestly don't know.
At 1 meter, at, you know, it depends on the distance, I guess, as well. I can quickly look up the specs of that. I think we're probably running over time though. So by the time we do that, we're probably running over. But again, we can get back to whoever asked the question for sure.
That's all the questions for now, guys.
Lovely. Then look, thank you everybody for coming on board, and please do contact Envision about Krix, because we'd love to have you all on board as dealers, I'm sure. And if you do have any questions again directly for us, please just fire it to info@krix.com, and we will endeavour to get back to you ASAP with good, correct answers. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you.